was a boy who always sought out comfort and hated discomfort in any form. Traffic, road rage, any little inconvenience set me off. Once I started embracing uncomfort, getting outside, bare feet on the ground, which after the stroke I had very bad sensitivity issues. Started getting outside, putting my bare feet on the ground, getting more sun on my body. Then I started taking cold showers. Oh
Mm.
my good God bless. Cold showers, if you've never tried cold exposure in any way, that is the single greatest impact on my mental health and my mindset that I've done out of everything.
Tristan, Captain Orangutan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brody. It's an honor.
Absolutely. My first question is just diving into what happened. It sounded like you had a brainstem stroke.
Yeah, really fun stuff. I'll give a little bit of a background to me. I ran all my life. I was always active. I became the first college soccer athlete of my family, second or third for my school to play in college. And at the end of sophomore year, I got hit really hard in the back of the head. Come to find out, I have a brain cyst. It grew. I developed hydrocephalus. And if you don't know what that means, it means I built up a spinal fluid in my brain, so my brain was swelling. From what I was told, at least. That's a whole different topic. Looking back on it, that neurosurgeon fear-mongered mom and I into doing the first surgery. Long story short, that one failed. I was back in the hospital 4 months later, and they did a bunch of failed brain and abdominal surgeries to cause a brainstem stroke, wiped my memory, threw my left eye out of alignment, sent my left side to factory settings, and going from a college soccer athlete to being unable to use half my body, that was very traumatic.
That's all I have to say right now as well.
Yeah, very fun stuff. A lot of character development happened.
What was the turning point for you in your recovery? At what point was rock bottom, the rock bottom of the rock bottom there? And at what point did you start to see a turnaround?
Rock bottom was when I started becoming conscious after the stroke happened
Mm.
and realized that my body didn't work. I struggled with thoughts of ending my existence on this earth. If you guys my drift, trying to censor for whatever platform you post this on. And I struggled with my belief in God because I went to a Southern Baptist college and all they did was preach hellfire and damnation. And if you don't believe in my version of God or whatever, you're going to hell, yada, yada, yada. So I questioned God. Like chose to not believe in all of that stuff. And one night when I had the 8 voices in my head, I decided to try it out. I wanted to find out if God, the creator, whatever you want to call it, was real. And I said, if he's not real, then I'm going to end it, right? So I gave all of the pain, anger, frustration, blame, guilt, whatever, other negative emotion, feeling, whatever, up to God, the creator, whatever you want to call it. And I decided to give it a couple of days just to see. Within those couple of days, something happens that helped me realize that I went through everything to help other people do the same thing, to get themselves out of that dark spot. And I lived for 2.5 years with a constant state of crippling depression and anxiety and imposter syndrome because I didn't know how I was going to do that. I was like, why me? 2.5 years later, I saw this video from Mason Core. He posted a video that claims how seed oils and ultra processed foods make us more sensitive to the sun. Since I'm a full-on ginger orangutan man who's always burnt within 10 minutes of being out in the sun, I decided to try it. I was like, you know what? Let's try it. I changed my diet, ditched all of the ultra processed foods for natural foods with similar flavor profiles. Ever since then, I've gotten sunburnt twice, and they turned into slight tans. So once I noticed this, once I lost 30 pounds in 3 months from that diet change, and I had more energy, I was like, what else is there? And so I started searching, started working to improve my sleep. I hired a coach. He taught me all these lifestyle hacks that helps me dramatically improve my health. I felt so much better after I finished his coaching, and I was hungry for more. And so I looked up different mindset methods to help improve like recovery, health, and stuff like that. And I put everything that I've found into my coaching, which is my short recovery coaching group. This stuff helps fundamentally transform my stroke recovery, improve the man that I am. I'm a better man than I ever was before in my life. To backtrack a little bit, the physical, occupational, and speech therapies got me very basic function on my left arm, my left side, right? I could walk, kind of. I could use my left arm, kind of. It stayed like that for the 2.5 years that I lived in crippling depression and anxiety. When I started changing my diet and improving my health and stroke recovery, I got more function back. And I was fascinated. And come to find out, the reason why these things help is because there's this molecule or protein or whatever it is in your brain that's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it promotes neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to rewire and heal from whatever traumatic things happen up here. That blew the gate open for me. I was like, oh my God, I've got to get this to more people. And I've included that in my coaching and in my content.
That's amazing, man. That's fantastic. You know, I reflects on my own journey, and you had that aha moment and it led to something else. And it's interesting that yours started with food as well, because it was also one of my friends, Kevin Ballister, who had a severe brain injury, diffuse axonal injury, and he started with nutrition. For me, it was learning about neuroplasticity. Dr. Joe Dispenza actually turned me on to that one, and it blew the floodgates open for me at that point. What was that process like when you woke up from the coma, and like kind of like moving your way through to, like, you had occupational therapy, and what did that time look like for you?
I will be completely honest. I have very little memory of my time in occupational and physical therapy. I like to say that my consciousness, I was in the dark, quiet void or abyss, where if you think this, I have two ways of explaining this. And for anyone listening, I would like to see if you can understand what I'm saying. Think back before your first memory, before you were born. What do you see and feel?
Nothing,
There
really.
we go. It's also similar to like whenever you have a night's sleep and you wake up and you don't remember your dreams the night before. You
Mhm.
see nothing. That's where I was whenever my body went through everything. Now that could be a trauma block, or that could literally be like my soul or my persona or ego, whatever, didn't want to be part of that process. Or I've also come up with a different theory. I felt like a different soul after I went through everything. And so potentially, maybe the other soul thought that it didn't want to do this anymore. And so a new soul just came into my body. I don't even know if that's possible.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very insightful, and we can't explain everything through science. I mean, it's only human understanding is a creation of that. And let's talk about mindset and resilience and empowerment. What does the word empowerment mean to you?
Empowerment. How much power that you have access to are you stepping into? So like I feel like this is my personal belief, what I've gathered after going through everything and helping others do the same thing. We have access to so much power. How much are you taking for yourself? How much are you using for yourself? Empowerment. So are you stepping, well, this is a slight play on words. Are you stepping into the power? Are you empowering yourself with an N, not an M?
Yeah, and this is where I will get a little geeky here with science. Is we have 37 trillion cells approximately in the human body. And when you think about how much potential energy is within each cell from a voltage standpoint, kind of mind-boggling. And that one blew me. I'm always humbled in God's creation, the universe's
Yeah.
creation, and so very few people think about that, number one, or know that, or aware of that, or even, I think it can be scary for people to realize how powerful they really are.
Yeah.
It's the victimhood, and the quiet, honest truth is every single day I have to be careful with the words that I say, and because I can easily fall into being a victim.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
you have to choose almost every day in 2025 to step into your power. So how do you do that?
Well, it's by simple word changes. So right there, you said you have to be conscious or you have to choose the words that you say in order to stay out of it. What if you change that to not have to? What if you get to?
Mm-hmm.
What if you get to choose to empower yourself? What if you get to choose to see things from a different perspective or see things from a better perspective? What if you get to choose to take or to claim more of that power for yourself and improve your life and your health? What if, what if you get to?
And you do get to. You do get to. That's the beautiful thing about being a human is we have this agency, this willpower, this choice that allows us to make a different choice than we made yesterday. Even in the moment before, if you're really aware.
Yep.
But I want to know from a neuroscience lens, did they find out, did they do a brain scan of you before and after? Uh, did they not? Okay.
Not that I know of. So how I found out I had a stroke was after I got released from the hospital, my family scheduled an appointment with an eye specialist because I have double vision. My left eye is thrown out of alignment from one, the stroke, and two, I have a shunt in the occipital lobe of my brain. Uh, so the specialist scheduled an eye, like a CT or MRI scan or whatever for my brain to see what damage was done. And one, repeated trauma to the brain from surgery, that causes a lot of brain damage. Two, she saw dead tissue on my brainstem. She didn't tell me what kind of stroke I had. She just said, it looks like you had a stroke on your brainstem and you were lucky to be alive. She didn't show me the scans or anything. And like when she told me that, I was like, oh my God, why did I survive? At that point in my life, I just didn't want to be here, I was
Mm.
heavy in the victim mindset.
When it comes to the idea of neuroplasticity and really how personality change, identity change, and all that beautiful stuff that can come from just making different choices every day. How did that manifest? Who were you before all of this and in the process leading up to today?
I was a boy who always sought out comfort and hated discomfort in any form. I wanted an easy life, and in doing that, I made everything in my life feel easy, and so it made it easier for small things to seem like big things, right? Traffic, road rage, any little inconvenience set me off. I was a stereotypical ginger with a short fuse, and once I started embracing uncomfort, like getting outside, bare feet on the ground, which after the stroke I had very bad sensitivity issues with my
Mhm.
feet. I always wore slides. Anyways, started getting outside, putting my bare feet on the ground, getting more sun on my body. Then I started taking cold showers. Oh
Mm.
my good God bless. Cold showers, if you've never tried cold exposure in any way, that is the single most, single greatest impact on my mental health and my mindset that I've done out of everything I've done. Because if you think about it, getting out of bed, out of your warm bed, and first thing in the morning, going and getting in a cold shower or even a cold tub, that is the last thing I want to do. I've been taking cold showers for almost 3 years now. Every single morning is the last thing I want to do. And every single morning, I hop my happy ass in there because I know after I feel that uncomfort, that pain, for lack of a better term, especially now because it's winter, um, or fall, um, I will feel so much better. And so I endure that short 5-6 minutes of discomfort so that I can enjoy the rest of my day. So everything else feels easier. Choosing your heart. You get to choose what you do throughout the day. Will you only choose to do the easy things that make your life actually feel harder in the long run? Or will you choose to do the short-term hard things in order to make your life feel easier? Delayed
Mm.
gratification. I'm sure we've all heard that term.
Yeah, when I was growing up as a kid, they talked about delayed gratification, and I wanted no part of that. I was like everybody else. I was addicted to drugs. I was addicted to alcohol. I was addicted to porn.
Yep.
You
Same.
name it. I was incredibly just addicted individual.
Addicted
And
to numbing your mind, really.
yes,
Yeah.
and I love what you said about the cold showers, lights of fire underneath me. I like to do breath holds is one of my favorite because
Yeah, that
nothing
one's
seems
really tough for me.
scarier when you're
Yeah.
to your brain, and I don't have oxygen right now. You know, your monkey mind gets pretty loud.
My
And
monkey mind is very untrained in that area. Seems very intriguing though.
it is. And what about like your heart space or like the neuroplasticity of the rest of your nervous system and body? For me
Like,
personally, I speak about people don't talk about the neuroplasticity of the heart for some weird reason. Heart Math Institute talks about it, and
yeah,
so
I've recently
grateful for
heard of
them.
that, and I haven't learned much about it. I'd like to know more.
Well, I think people think of this as neuroplasticity, and it's true, you know, rewiring new pathways, et cetera, and it forms everything that we do. But for me personally, emotions, I feel like they come from the heart.
Oh
That
yeah,
the brain is like a polarity organ. It thinks in terms of black and white, good and bad. But when you're in your heart space, compassionate, like
that's where
self-compassion,
your
love,
intuition is really stored.
and that's where I found a lot of healing personally. And I even try to teach it to like world-class athletes who don't want to hear it from me. I'm like, you would be winning more if you tapped into
Yeah,
this space, but as scary as a man, I think, especially.
yeah, because we're
Not to
trained
say
to.
that women have their own issues. Let be straight up, is just as hard. But for a man, I think it's more difficult to tap into your heart space.
Yeah, because we're conditioned to be a man. You know, boys don't cry. Yada yada yada. You got to shove everything down and become angry and become an asshole, just like every other man. I'm like, it is so much stronger to feel the emotions, especially as a man, than to push them down because you get to let that energy be in motion, emotion. And when you let that energy be in motion, that shit doesn't weigh you down anymore. You get to live free and happy and abundant. I push the emotions that I feel down my entire life. I always ran from the thoughts in my head as well. And when I decided to face them in my what I call my dark quiet room method, I realized that the dark thoughts that were in my head weren't even my thoughts at all. They were thoughts that were implanted in my head by an abusive man that I had for most of my childhood. And I carried those with me as my own because I was
Mm.
manipulated into believing those things. When I realized that he's where those thoughts came from, I attached them to him. It was easier to get them out of my head. And then I combined that with action. So like doing things like cold showers and exercising and things like that with positive affirmations to replace them. And I have successfully reprogrammed my subconscious to feed me positive thoughts. It's like anytime I make a mistake, which is a lesson that I give myself, I'm like, damn, I'm a genius. I'm never gonna do this shit again, you know? And dude, like the things that I've done that I've made mistakes on, when I frame it in that way, they don't happen again because I remember it, you know? And I don't get mad about it. I laugh and I make a witty, sarcastic joke and I move on. I don't let that shit weigh me down.
I love
And
that.
old Tristan though, Red, the athlete persona, he was the opposite.
That's powerful. And I think about the same thing occurred to me was an NLP technique that I wasn't aware of, that inner voice, and I didn't know where it was coming from, right? And so they use these weird techniques, and I learned like that if you hear that voice and it's coming, like you visualize it, a lot of times you'll notice that it's coming from the back of your head.
Really.
And there's ways of reprogramming that because now it starts with awareness. It starts with awareness, and like you're so aware, your brain is so aware, your body or mind or whatever you want to call it, that you can, there's ways of detecting that it's not even your voice to start with, it was somebody else's, because you can kind of feel that it's coming from back that way.
Yeah.
Some weird esoteric stuff. I mean, it's not esoteric. I'm programmed to call that esoteric.
Yeah, we
But
all.
yeah, I
Yeah.
let's get into society these days and just how manipulative things are, how social media is not social. Social media is created to divide, and that's not a conspiracy theory. If you
Yeah,
look at the
algorithms,
algorithms, they don't promote
algorithms.
courage. They don't
Well,
promote
not
courage.
only that, algorithms promote what we believe, right? So if you look at X, a lot of people have said that they only see things that they agree with, or they see things that are the exact opposite of what they agree with, and it's like intended to stir the pot, like to get things going. Same with all the other social media platforms. They either feed you what you agree with, or they feed you the exact opposite in order to trigger something within you.
Mm.
And if they get that reaction, they're going to feed you more of that stuff because it gets you to stay on the out or the platform longer. So whichever one gets you to stay on the platform longer, they're going to feed you more of. It's all a manipulation of the mind or emotional manipulation or whatever. They're trying to figure out what makes you tick. That's what I
And I
found.
think it's a little more sinister too,
Oh
to
yeah,
be quite
absolutely.
honest.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
that's the like the what's it called? The broad idea
mhm.
or broad theme from what I've gathered.
So when it comes to helping people that have experienced a stroke,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the first foundational things you would do with somebody? And this is a generalization, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, if you were in their shoes and you just experienced a stroke of the many forms, what are some of the first things you would help that person tackle?
Very first thing, before I even got to the diet change, I would tell them to fully feel every single emotion that you feel. Because if you've had a stroke or if you know someone who's had a stroke, you know that incredibly negative emotions pop up. And if you try to push those emotions down, they're going to fight to get out. If you feel them in an area or safe, like a safe container to where you will not be judged, you will not be hurt, you will not be cast out for feeling them, and obviously feel them in a way that's safe for yourself and others. Once you feel them, you will already feel a weight lift off your shoulders. And the more that you hold on to those emotions, the more that you keep them from being in motion, the more chronic health issues will come up, the more it will hinder your recovery. So the first thing would be to fully feel those emotions. The second thing would be diets. My philosophy is the more natural, the better, the less pesticides, the better. So swap any ultra processed foods and drinks that you like with natural foods and drinks with similar flavor profiles. You could do like fruit juices. Make sure it's like not from concentrate because that's I don't know too much about that. I just know that pure fruit juice is better. So like I was addicted to sour and sweet candies. So what I do, I swapped them all for sour and sweet fruits. And I focused on getting higher quality meats and the less ingredients the better. You can download these apps called EWG Healthy Living and Yuka. Yuka focuses more on the nutrition counts of like the protein, calories, fats, yada yada yada. And EWG focuses more on ingredients, which I am a big fan of because once I learned, gonna backtrack. I vaped for the 2.5 years, okay? When I learned the negative effects of the ingredients that I was putting into my lungs, I went cold turkey.
Mm.
And so I became very, very big on ingredient quality. And so I use EWG a lot more than Yuka. Um, yeah. And my coaching layout, so it starts with nutrition, then it goes to what I call mental health hacks, which, different sayings and things that I've learned from the brain surgeries and stroke, different perspectives to help you feel more empowered rather than more like a victim.
Hmm.
Um, then we get into sleep, then we go to wake, and yada yada yada. It's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are some things that you learned about the human brain in your recovery journey?
Oh, dude, the importance of diet and lifestyle habits. So I was raised to believe that they didn't matter at all. And when I changed my diet and lost the 30 pounds in 3 months from just changing my diet, I was like, holy shit, what? And then when I found that article on BDNF, it gave specific foods, and I personally disagree with some of them, and that's
Mm-hmm.
completely fine. What works for me may not work for whoever's listening, and what works for whoever's listening may not work for me. It's completely fine. And our body gets nourishment and creates cells from what we put in and on it. So when we eat higher quality foods and do things that like get more sun exposure consciously or ground, it helps our body make better cells. And better cells lead to a better recovery and better health.
What does a daily reprogramming or programming your own mind look like in your life?
So when I first started off, first it was just changing my diet. I started feeling better. I felt less of a fog, the haze, the aphasia that I had after the stroke that started disappearing. Once I added cold showers in, I started taking them as soon as I woke up, and I took it slow. I ended my warm showers with cold water and eventually worked my way up to where I was taking the full on cold shower. And when I got to that point, I stood in front of the faucet and I said, I'm doing this because I want to love myself. And I would turn the cold water on. And then eventually it got to, I'm doing this because I'm starting to love myself. And then eventually
Mm.
it got to, I'm doing this because I love myself. Now,
Mm.
the first time that I genuinely said that I love myself, I'm going to get emotional because this is heavily emotional day for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was at the first captain's lifestyle immersion that I went to after I finished that coach's training or coaching, and at on the second to last day before we left, he challenged us with doing an ice bath, having a bamboo straw in our mouths, and all the way underneath and just breathing through the straw. I stayed under for like 2.5, 3 minutes, and when I got out, my blood pressure had tanked, and the guys helped me into the sauna, and
Damn.
I sat in the sauna. I had my elbows on my knees and my head in my hands, and I was just like recapping everything, and bro, I looked at the ground. I said, I finally love myself. I burst out crying, and the other guys that were in the sauna just celebrated the fuck out of me because I realized, I learned that doing challenging things helps build character, especially for men, right? Doing challenging things, challenging yourself, and overcoming the challenge, that will help build your mind and your character and your confidence, your self love as well, so much,
Mm-hmm.
because men and women are different. Okay, so like with women, it would be better to there's resources out there for this. I know very little on it. It would be better to sync your cycle, your hormonal cycle, with cold showers, cold exposure, because y'all are on a 28-day cycle and we are on a 24-hour cycle. Um, and like back in the old days, there was a trial or a what was it called? It was a women are born with theirs. They get their period sometime when they're early teens or even before sometimes. Men, though, we don't have one, though. So when we choose to do it, because that was my trial, right? Going through and doing the cold bath or the ice bath and staying underneath for that long, that was my, oh, the word, like, it's at the edge of my mind. That was my trial to become a man, right? And so whenever I accomplished that, that's when I was able to unlock all of the self love that I had been chasing for the
That's
past or for the
powerful.
like the year before. Um, so yeah, when you go when you start to try things or do things that help you earn your manhood, for the lack of a better term, you will feel so much better. It's like it's something that they had throughout history, and that's something that we don't have anymore. So we've got to do it ourselves, or we get
We
to do it
either
ourselves.
find, we get to do it, and we get to find resources that lead us down the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, I love that. And it makes me think about I was only 13. I was bar mitzvahed,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not a man at that time. They have you drink wine. It was like, I guess maybe 13 was different than it used to be
Mm-hmm.
because I was not a man at that point. Um, but I think 13, the connotation of that number has changed now that we have more
Mm-hmm.
resources, and Brian Johnson, like whether you hate him or love him, I think he's doing some cool stuff. at first I was like, screw that guy, what a D bag, and then
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
like,
he does cool things. I think the reasons why he does them is So like his whole thing is like don't die. And I'm like, why don't you want to die? That's a whole natural
right,
human concept, you know? Like why don't you
yeah.
focus more on living rather than not dying?
Yeah,
That's
it
where I
could it
disagree with him.
could be based out of fear, but
Yeah.
I like that he thinks outside the box
Yeah.
as well. Righteous, man. I think that's a great ending point right there. Is there anything you would like to tell the listeners who, if you would just imagine for a second, a listener may be in a deep, dark state of depression. They may be in a deep state of anxiety, stress, doubt, worry, self doubt. What would you tell somebody, whether they're dealing with a brain injury or a stroke or concussion, or perhaps it's just like depression and issues with being alive these days?
I know this is something that you don't want to hear, and that's completely fine. It's the truth, or is a fact. When you do things that make you feel more comfortable while you're in that state of depression or anxiety or imposter syndrome or whatever negative feeling it is, you will only reinforce that negative feeling. When you step out of your comfort zone, start doing things to challenge yourself, like cold shower or cold baths or exercise or even just getting outside and getting sunlight on your body, that stuff will start helping you feel better. It's a mental reprogramming, like we mentioned earlier in this podcast episode. When you start working on reprogramming your mindset, your subconscious, that will help you get unstuck. That'll help you do more than just get unstuck. That'll help you create a whole new version of yourself that's better than ever. I mean, I was a college soccer athlete, okay? I was so active, I had so much energy, and I filled my body with terrible things. I filled my mind with terrible things. I felt like a terrible young man. I was a terrible young man. When I started putting better things in my body and challenging myself, putting better things in my mind as well, that's when I started becoming a better young man. That's when I started getting out of that depression, anxiety, and imposter syndrome and creating a new version of myself. So, yes, it's so safe to be in your comfort zone, and comfort is where your dreams and your goals and your life die. And you with it if you stay with it long enough.
I felt the power and the realization in those words. Thank you, Tristan, for coming on. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at captain_orangutan. That's ORANGUTAN. You can find me on TikTok at CAP_O_. YouTube, I post less on there, and I may start posting longer form content. That is Captain_orangutan. Facebook is Captain Orangutan.